Good morning, Business 101 students. Today I'm going to be touching base, talking about week 3 and instructions for week 3. Week 3, we are going to be looking at chapters 5 and 6 from the text. So first, I will talk about chapter 5, and then I will talk about chapter 6. There is a video this week that I also want you to view, a short video on types of business formation that relates to chapter 6. There are 2 homework assignments, Chapter 5 homework and Chapter 6. There is also a discussion during week 3, that is our second discussion of the term. All right, I'm going to go through. I'm also assigning the term project this week in week 3. There is an instructional video along with the project form I will post it here, but it's also under course-specific content on Blackboard, but I will also post a link in this week's assignments so that you can look at that and you can start in on that project, which is due the last week of the term, as well as the PowerPoint that goes with the project. All right, so looking at week 3, chapter 5 of the text, if you are scrolling through and you're wondering what is going on with Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is relating to business communication, creating and delivering messages that matter. And so you will also take some classes here at EC3 that relate to communication, right? Talking about listening and understanding feedback. We'll talk about in Chapter 5, you will review some of the communication barriers and things that interfere with communication. We have barriers relating to cultural, organizational, language barriers, physical barriers, right? If we are far away from the person that we are communicating with. Some of the nonverbal communication that we miss out on when we are using emails and texts and those types of things. A review of what active listening is. There was also Exhibit 5.1 in Chapter 5, starts to talk about the listening do's and don'ts, so make sure you review that, and I believe there are some questions relating to that in this week's homework assignment for Chapter 5. Also thinking about some of the channels that we use for communication and methods for effective communication and things to avoid if we are trying to be effective in our communication. Touching on active and passive voice, which you also touch on in your English courses, and how to write effectively, because writing is part of our communication style, whether it's email, text, or handwritten memos or letters. A review of what goes into a handwritten letter. PowerPoints, how we use PowerPoint examples, and how we use PowerPoint to effectively communicate with groups. And to sum it up, then also a short review of the 10 tips for dynamic delivery. This is Exhibit 5.6, right? And so make sure that you review that. And then that is our slide set for Chapter 5. Chapter 6 then goes into a few other items, and those items relate to business formation. Every business has to figure out how it's going to form. So then when you're looking at your slides now, you will see learning outcomes, right? And for some reason, the slides sometimes come out a little funny when you download them, but hopefully you're finding everything okay. This chapter talks about the difference between things called a sole proprietorship, where there's a single owner, a partnership where there might be 2 owners, and corporations, and then limited liability companies. A lot of you have heard of LLC, or you've seen LLC written after a company. This chapter goes into what an LLC is and the benefits to having an LLC and how it protects you, right? As an owner, your company becomes a separate entity, and so you, as an owner, then actually are employed by your own company. And there are some lists in our PowerPoints, listed in the chapter, advantages and disadvantages of sole proprietorships, of partnerships, relating to liability, tax issues, limited liabilities and limited partnerships, C corporations, so a lot of anything with a stockholder, like your publicly traded companies that you are choosing, right? They're stockholders. and talking a little bit about common stock. Board of directors, all of the companies that you have chosen for your project, which is going to be assigned this week. And there's a video that relates to that as well that I will put the link in week 3. The board of directors really oversees the CEO and a lot of the comings and goings of the company, right? And so you'll touch on that. Every publicly traded company has that board of directors. Some advantages then of corporations. And there's also some examples in here of an S Corp and a nonprofit corporation. A lot of us know what nonprofits are, right? Corporate restructuring, there's some review of that. The difference between an acquisition, merger, and divestiture. So you'll see that on slide 13 and also in chapter 6 in the text. Advantages of limited liability companies, and the question for discussion relates a little bit to forming a company in Pennsylvania. So I will get to that discussion here next after talking about chapter 6. Talking about franchises, right? If you've ever, maybe you have a family member or a friend that owns a franchise, and how we work on franchises and franchising in today's economy. Some of the advantages and disadvantages of franchising. And so this chapter also talks about how those agreements work and, if you're interested. So we have the different types of companies, but we also then have, if we might want to franchise like a McDonald's, right, or Subway, those are franchise opportunities. Sonic, right? And that is chapter 6, talking about structures of companies. Now, so you have chapter 5 and chapter 6, and you have homework for both of those chapters. Chapters 5 and chapter 6. Now this week we also have chapters 5 and chapter 6, we also have a discussion post. And the discussion post relates a little bit to chapter 6, but also to our state here, Pennsylvania, since I know you are all residents of Pennsylvania because you're here at the Erie County Community College. And so this is our second discussion post. And I see that a couple of you have already worked on that. So you will log in either through the week or you can go right to the discussion board. And if you log in through the week, at the bottom of the week, you can click on discussion number 2. And this is an application question that, and you're able to talk a little bit about what a partnership agreement spells out. And so after reading chapter 6, you should have a little bit of an idea of what a typical partnership agreement might lay out, and some specific duties and responsibilities that each person in the partnership might be responsible for, right? How they might settle disagreements. You may also have to do a quick Google search as to how partnerships work, and talk a little bit about what a well-written agreement would be in a partnership. Again, you're going to use 2 to 3 sentences minimum to answer this discussion question. You can do a little research, come up with a checklist maybe. You can use bullet points, right, regarding some steps, forms, and fees that it would take to establish a general partnership in Pennsylvania. In the discussion I have in your state, I've used this before for students that are at in a college where they may come from different states, right? For us, we're all going to be doing Pennsylvania. I guess if you are new to Pennsylvania, you could do a previous state, but let's just stick with Pennsylvania for the most part. Explore what's required from Pennsylvania. You can go to the pennsylvania.gov, pa.gov site, or you can use the Google, right, and find out some information about forming a partnership in Pennsylvania. You could use legalzoom.com as well. Explore what's required for naming the partnership, what could be covered in the partnership agreement, some steps to register for tax purposes at both the state and federal level. Again, you're not going to have an in-depth coverage of all of these, but give me a few sentences, 2 to 3 sentences, a short paragraph as to if you and a friend, you and a partner were going to form a business as a partnership, and what might be some of the guidelines that you use. All right, if you are not required to reply to a classmate, but if you decide to, make sure that you are using respectful and inclusive language. Some of these might be quite interesting, and some folks may actually have partnerships that they are working on, so they might have more insight than others. I'm looking for your best effort here, so please take a shot at it. So those are the assignments for this week. Oh, and the video. Did I not have I did not talk about the video. Okay. There is a video that is actually, it's called Types of Business Formation. When you click on week 3, you will see this. It relates to chapter 6, and it kind of is an overview of chapter 6. And this is written by an accountant, actually an accountant that specializes in taxation, right? Because the formation of your business has a lot to do with how the business is taxed and the amount of liability that the business has. And so he talks very quickly, and he talks about some taxation forms. And so you don't necessarily have to know those, but I think this video does a good job of outlining the sole proprietorship, the limited liability, the partnership, those types of things that are actually in your text from week 6. And so if you get a little bit sidetracked when reading chapter 6, I think this video will bring you back around and does a nice review of chapter 6. So as always, if you have questions, let me know. Remember that homework is due at the end of our week at 11:59 p.m. I will circle back around later in the week to remind you about homework and check and see if anyone has any questions. Again, this week is chapter 5 and chapter 6. And the discussion post number 2 relating to week 3 is up and running in this week's assignments. Don't forget to take a look at the term project, which I'm also introducing this week, and there's a separate video for that. Have a wonderful day, and I will get back at you soon.